Your Worship, before you get that procedural motion, there is an addition to it. It's 92B of the Community Charter, and I can speak to that once we are in camera, what that late item is.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gurry. Motion to go in camera, Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Bonner. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to the regular July 6th meeting of Council. I'd first like to recognize that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Sinamic First Nation. Our clerk tonight will be Ms. Sheila Gurry. Tonight's regular meeting of Council will be held in accordance with the Community Charter, Council Procedure Bylaw 2018, number 7272, and Ministerial Order number M192. Therefore, members of the public are required to observe meetings virtually and not attend in person. Delegation requests for unrelated council matters will not be permitted under this order throughout the duration of the pandemic. Delegation requests related to agenda matters, such as a developer that would like to speak to his or her DP application, or a member of the public to speak to an item on the agenda, will be allowable as physical distancing requirements could be maintained. Question period will be suspended throughout the duration of this order being in effect. Council will attend via Zoom or in person at these regular meetings, maintaining physical distancing at all times. And members of staff that are partaking in the meeting will be spread out in the auditorium in the marked seating or outside in the lobby area. And the first item on the agenda is the introduction of late items. And Ms. Gurry, we have a couple.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The audio sounds very different to me this evening.
Sounding a bit echoey, I think.
So my apologies. For agenda item 10F, development permit application DP 1169 at 1125 Seafield Crescent. We're adding a delegation from Dariush Ferolzi, architect AIBC, Eric Kutzner, and Matthew Stevens. For agenda item 12A, we're adding a notice of motion from Councillor Gesselbrock regarding the Nanaimo Neighborhood Zero Emission Vehicle Bylaw. As well, Your Worship, Councillor Hammons just brought to my attention an error in 5C, the minutes from the June 18th, 2020 council meeting. So I'd ask council to remove those from the list of minutes, and we'll bring them back once I've corrected them.
Very good, thank you. Motion for approval of the agenda is amended. Moved Councillor Bonner, seconded Councillor Thorpe. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Motion for adoption of the minutes as circulated, including only items A, B, and D. Moved Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Hammons. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Mayor's report. I have a few items tonight. I just want to provide a very quick update on the opening of recreation facilities that were closed in March due to the COVID-19 pandemic. A planning process is underway to reopen City and Nanaimo recreation facilities. It involves a number of steps, and I'll just go through those very quickly. It's consulting and working through established guidelines and recommendations from various organizations, including the province, WorkSafe, BC Recreation and Parks, Life Saving Societies, Via Sport, and more. Conducting an in-depth risk assessment, preparing a site safety plan as required by WorkSafe BC for 5 major recreation centres, 4 sheets of ice, 3 aquatic facilities, and 4 activity centres. Reviewing programs and services, determining what can safely continue, what needs modification, what needs to be delayed. Working through a service delivery review where it is determined what can operate at each facility and with how many people. Revising operating schedules based on enhanced cleaning practices, physical distancing, provincial order of 50 or less per activity, and training and recertifying staff on new safety procedures such as enhanced life-saving protocols, retrofitting buildings, etc. I'm asking the public who have been obviously very interested in this, including a number of emails to council, to try and be patient. I think we all have to accept that we are used to a high level of service from our Parks and Recreation Department in this community, as we are from water, sewer, and garbage, and all the other services this city provides, but we are still in the midst of a pandemic. We are still in the midst of a declared provincial state of emergency, and patience is the virtue that we expect all citizens to demonstrate continuously in their relationships with one another and in their relationships with the city. We are going to do what's best in the public interest, and people may disagree with the reasoning, but I would rather be on the safe side as mayor of this council, ensuring that, in fact, public safety remains paramount, particularly if there's a second wave. The City of Nanaimo is reopening the lacrosse boxes in Harewood Covered Sports Court. That was distributed back in June. and delighted to announce that. But again, adherence to physical distancing guidelines, washing hands, avoiding the area of sick, not sharing equipment, food, or water, not congregating groups of 50, not playing contact or in a competitive way, and booking any formal use through allocations by calling 250-756-5214. A business survey has been introduced to inform the city's economic development strategy. Businesses are obviously invited to fill it out, but also individuals, and there's an opportunity to indicate whether you own or operate a business, and I'm right at the beginning of the form. This is an important opportunity around economic development strategy. And I want to say, as someone who has been involved in politics much of my life, when government gives you an opportunity to participate, please don't come back 6 months down the road and say we weren't consulted. This is an easy, open opportunity for everyone to comment on economic development in this city. The survey asks questions about Nanaimo's business climate, future economic goals, business development priorities, immediate and anticipated impacts of COVID. Responses are confidential, and the survey takes only approximately 10 minutes to complete. And I encourage you to fill it out between, it was effective June 15th to July 17th, and it can be accessed from the link, which I won't bother repeat, but it is available through the city website, and I encourage all of you to take advantage of it. And on a very happy note, new artwork called One Song Staircase for downtown Nanaimo. Humanity in Art collaborates with poet Tina Biello. Commissioned by the City of Nanaimo, artist team Liz Glassford and Lauren Semple of Humanity in Art have collaborated with poet Tina Biello to create a new artwork for downtown Nanaimo called One Song Staircase. Painting is underway and will be completed in the first few days of July. It might even be finished as I speak. The staircase is between Wharf and the rear of Diana Krall Plaza. It was identified by Humanity in Art as an ideal location for their attention. They describe it as a, quote, unloved and underutilized urban space located in the heart of the Nanaimo Arts District. And I encourage all of you to go down to see them if they're still working on it, and if not, see the completed project. Public art is a huge enhancement to this community and reflective of the strong artistic drive that Nanaimo's always had. And finally, on a note, in a world which seems, and I'm going to just blow a little bit here, in a world in which there seems to be so much stress and tension and anger and frustration and the naming of groups based on religion and ethnicity and all sorts of things that don't reflect the basics of life, and that is that we are all individuals. And it ill behooves any of us to pick out any groups or peoples in any community, in any society, and somehow expect that they all share things in common. What we share in common is our humanity and our need to be loved and be respected, and to recognize that many of us, not necessarily around this table obviously, work in positions that are extremely difficult and challenging, who face that interface between those who have and those who have not, day in, day out. And both everyone needs to be respected and honored. And I'm hoping that as we move through this summer, which is going to be extremely difficult for many who rely on this season to earn income, to support their education, or in the tourist industry who rely on this season in order to survive economically, now is a particularly important time to support one another in every way, and that includes locally, economically. We had a bit of a report tonight that indicates that we are receiving significant quantities of cardboard. There's a twist in the COVID side of things that is providing problems for our recycling and pickup. And what it means is that many of you are choosing to make purchases safely, and I understand that, to ensure that you don't have to go to stores or businesses. But please, where you can, try and support local businesses. Because every time you get that package delivered, there's a bit of cardboard to be recycled and dealt with, and that's creating problems for the city. It's just one of the many aspects as we struggle through COVID together. And as we come into the summer season, I wish all of you, particularly those of you who have children, I hope you survive the summer as you try and keep them challenged at the very time when we can't offer them the recreational activities that we historically have. And as some of you face significant challenges for childcare as well. Thank you very much for listening. Nothing to rise and report on. A motion for adoption of the consent items. Moved Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Bonner. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. And on to Mr. Harding, and a happy report on the Harewood Skate Park opening.
Thank you, Richard. And again, that's our second virtual opening. And I again, I encourage council to jump in at any time as we present this, as we were doing, as you were at the soft opening last week. But again, very excited to announce the opening of the skateboard park. I just was there just before council. It was very busy, very active. But just like we did last time for the Mayfield Playground, we'll just do some pictures. And again, council, please jump in on anything as you were there. Some of them you're definitely included in. Again, for people who may not know, this is actually called a youth park, but it's a skateboard park also at Harewood Centennial Park, and a great addition. This isn't Photoshop. This is an actual photo of the youth using the park. Jesse Birch from the art gallery, who also, I should go back and make sure the artwork was by two young artists, one Joel Good from Snamo Nation, and also Bracken Hanos Corlett from the Clacus. Councilor Bonner, how do I do? Clacus Nation. They did the artwork. They tried to take the theme of the river right beside the Chase River, the salmon theme, and also keep that active aspect of a skateboard youth park. There's some of the different people utilizing it, some of the artwork. The bowl is going to be very, very, very popular. It's one of the only ones on the island like this. There's some older skaters.
Contrasting
we have some younger
the cool
skaters, and
and
we
the
have
uncool.
some older skaters. I am disappointed that neither of them have their helmet on. But I'm sure they were just posing, and if they were skating, they would have their safety equipment on. There's a whole group shot of a number of, this was quite a partnership, and we'll go through, Your Worship, in a few moments, all the different partners that were part of this skateboard park. In fact, we're going to do a longer video to open up to the public later on this summer, because it was a lot of groups and organizations that worked along a number of years to make this happen, and we'll go through some of that in a few seconds here. One group particularly here is the Mid-Island Co-op, who donated $30,000 towards a project. That's Ian Anderson from the co-op providing a check. And the ladies on each side we'll talk about in a second, Heather Campbell and Peggy Lake. Both women, very instrumental over the years. And this is a number of years, 4 or 5, maybe 6, 7 years of trying to make this happen. I know for Miss Lake, it's longer than that. So it's a great day for them to have it in Harewood and have that amenity for the youth. There they are there. Again, both very, very active in the community, and we wouldn't have it if it wasn't for that kind of participation. Some of our younger skaters. And with that was the neighborhood, the Skateboard Association was also quite key into this all the way through. And as you see, the age of skaters now tends to go all different age groups. So here we have some very, very young ones there, and then some older ones still in the background. But again, it's the idea is that it's an active park for everybody. And now just some action shots of all the equipment. And I'll go through quickly if you like, Your Worship. The final design of the skate park features 2 main areas: street-style plaza, complete with 8 types of facilities, descending taco with roll ends, 3 block gap ups with ledge bank and up gaps, I don't know the terms either, turnarounds and drop-in banks, start sets with hubba ledges and rails, banked hips, wedges to wedges, manual pads without ledges and long flat rails, kidney-shaped bowl, and slappy wall with down rails. The park design was completed with input from community skaters and youth representatives from the Harewood area over the years. And just we'll finish off with a few more action shots here. I think that's the last one. I'll go back. So, Your Worship, again, just to make sure I don't miss anybody. Harewood Neighborhood Association, again, with Peggy Lake and Heather Campbell being anchors to that for a number of years. The Mid-Island Co-op donation. Nama Art Gallery with Jesse Birch coordinating all of this artwork with the artists and working through that with the art gallery. UBCM Community Works Fund, so this is a gas tax funded project, over $509,000 of that fund going towards this. Alternative Groove, the Nanaimo Skate Park Association, Knowles Estate, which you've heard me talk about over the years. Again, Knowles Estate, gentleman passed away many years ago, and his estate continues. His goal was to add from his estate money into the Harewood area for projects just like this, and we use the interest of his estate to fund projects like this. And then also, over the years, as developments occurred in that area, so some of those community contributions for those rezonings and such that you see in council, we save those up and put them towards this project also. So, Your Worship, that's the presentation. And if, again, another virtual opening. Hopefully we'll keep a few more this summer to council. And with this, I'll turn it over to council.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harding. And I just want to say that Mr. Knowles was my client many years ago. I drew the very will that made provision for his family home to provide the basis of bequest for the city. And I want to say that it's that kind of devotion and love to the city of Nanaimo that's reflected in all of the people who worked so very hard, particularly in the South End, and you've mentioned Ms. Lake and Ms. Campbell and many others. The Co-op, which has been a long-standing institution in this community, all of whom contributed to ensure that this wonderful facility was completed. I want to say thank you to previous councils who were involved in this. This has been a project on the books for a very long time. To your staff and the enthusiasm you bring to it in your leadership role, and the senior staff at the city generally, and all of those. This is what community looks like, folks. It's not something you'll catch me doing, but I am awfully glad to live in a community that cares enough about its citizens and its youth, and those who are older youth, and there were a number of them there performing brilliantly, I must admit, and somewhat frighteningly, who so enjoy something like this. It's a great spot. It's going to attract as well, and I'm going to be crass about this, because it's of such high quality. I understand that it may well attract tourists to this community just for the opportunity to use that frightening bowl that I didn't see Councillor Bonner swooping down in, notwithstanding my encouragement. But it's good news all around, and again, thank you very much. And maybe I will officially, notwithstanding we were there on the weekend, or previously last week, and just to declare it officially open. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If there's any questions, I'd be pleased to answer anything from council.
Council.
Thank you.
Aichkasia. On to reports. The first is Ms. Ligon, 2019 Statement of Financial Information.
Your Worship and Council, thank you. I am going to very quickly here turn this over to Ms. Mercer for the 2019, what we call in finance the SOFI report, which is the Statement of Financial Information.
Ms. Mercer.
Thank you, Your Worship. As Ms. Ligon said, we are here to present the 2019 Statement of Financial Information. And each year, under normal circumstances, this would have been due on June 30th, but like so many other things, COVID has bumped up or delayed the due date to August 31st this year. So we're a little bit later than we normally are. So the SOFI is mainly made up of the schedule of remuneration and expenses, and the schedule of goods and services. So the remuneration and expenses is a listing of all council wages and expenditure or expenses, as well as a listing of all staff who made over $75,000 and their corresponding expenses. The schedule of goods and services is a listing of all vendors who we paid over $25,000 during the year. Now, the report also includes information relating to debt. So the schedule of debt, all of the information for our debt is in our financial statements under Note 9. And this year we had $41.6 million in outstanding debt at the end of December 2019. It includes a schedule of guarantee and indemnity. So, and again, all of this information is included in our financial statements. And we had, the only thing we had this year was $2 million line of credit for the Port Theatre Society, which we have had for several years. And lastly, the schedule of severance agreements. And in 2019, we didn't have any. So that's kind of a brief overview of the SOFI report. I'm happy to take any questions, if anybody has any.
I don't think so, Ms. Mercer. I'll just thank you and staff for the work they've done, and also to say that it's wonderful to live in a functioning democracy where this kind of information is available to the public, and consistent with our policy and promises around openness and transparency for the city. Thank you very much. I need a motion. Councillor Turley. Recommended motion for approval. We have a seconder, Councillor Bonner. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is the Community Vitality Grant Take a Hike Foundation. Mr. Lindsay, please.
Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship and Council. As mentioned, this next item is regarding an earlier grant. Each year, the City Council supports social planning grants, including $60,000 to what are termed social response grants. Those are generally projects, and $25,000 to community vitality grants. This project, the application before you this evening is one of those community vitality grants that was offered or provided a $10,000 grant in 2020, and their application was to buy a 25-seat passenger van. For various reasons, I understand you have a delegation this evening, they'll probably go into more detail. They're not proceeding with that project, and they are now asking for council support in reallocating that grant money from the van over to a clinical counselor, expanding the hours of service that are available to that clinical counselor. As outlined in the report, Your Worship, under our terms, we do not generally cover operating as part of our grant program, so there may be some discussion or debate amongst council about whether this meets the intent of those grants or not. The other thing I just want to touch on quickly, the report mentions, I think under option 2, that if in the event council denies this application, the money would return into the grant pool, and therefore a higher amount would be available next year. I would say that could be true, but that would still be subject to council approval. It wouldn't automatically happen. We'd actually seek council's direction on what to do with the grant funds. Unless there's any questions, Your Worship, I'll turn it over back to yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Lindsay. If the delegation would like to come forward, and if you could introduce yourself and give us your address, and 5 minutes. We have to wait for the wipe down.
Yeah, no problem.
Good evening.
Your Worship, council members. My name is Ann Martin. I'm on the board of the Take a Hike Foundation. I've been with the foundation for about a year. I've been an Nanaimo resident for about 15 years. I first want to thank you for inviting me to address this. As the previous speaker mentioned, we're here to request a reallocation of funds that were given to us, $10,000 for the purchase of a 24-passenger vehicle in support of the significant pandemic that's going on right now. We have really understood the priorities of our organization, and we'd like to redirect those funds to supporting the hire of a clinical counselor. So I'll tell you a little bit about what we do at Take a Hike. So Take a Hike is a full-time mental health and emotional well-being program that uses outdoor and adventure-based learning to support youth at risk. We recently opened up a classroom in Nanaimo, so we've had several in the Lower Mainland. It started in September of 2019. We have 15 very vulnerable youth in our care, and we hope to, in 2020, expand that so that we can support 40 additional students. As you can imagine, the COVID-19 has really reaffirmed some of the intensive and continuous mental health support that we need to provide these vulnerable youth. Just reflecting on my own mental health, I'm sure you all felt quite challenged when we were first faced with the pandemic. And if you can imagine, what we faced is paltry compared to what these vulnerable youth have faced. The youth that we support face anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, addictions. They have significant past trauma. They suffer from food insecurity, hopelessness. We have some that are street entrenched. And if you think that this crisis compounded your own mental health challenges, it's been very significant for these youth and their families. The reality is that the kids in our program here in Nanaimo struggle from serious mental health issues, both social and emotional challenges, past trauma, and about 3/4 of the children that are the youth that we support have substance use issues. And those struggles that they have are significant barriers to their success both in life and in school. Since March, many of our participants' families have lost their income, they're experiencing food insecurities, heightened anxiety, hopelessness. They're not alone. Our school district partners are telling us that the support we provide at Take a Hike Foundation is very much in dire need for other students across the province, specifically in Nanaimo. Without these adequate support that we're providing, these youth are at serious risk of backsliding back into their destructive and coping behaviors, and that includes serious isolation, withdrawal, using self-isolation, or using substances, and experiencing self-harm. If you allow us to redirect this grant funding, we would be able to support hiring an additional clinical counselor that will allow us to increase the size of our classroom sooner to support the 40 that we hope to do in September. As I mentioned, these supports are quite intensive at the moment, and they're in very dire need. We're hoping that we can help improve the lives of these youth, both their mental health and their resilience, and that supporting them during this crisis, significant support, will re-engage them back in school and help them achieve social and academic success. I do want to tell you that it touches me quite a bit to be on this board. We do some phenomenal work. We had 3 grade 12 students this year. They are all set to graduate. One woman in particular, she was street entrenched with her sister. She was 3 grades behind. She managed to catch up to grade 12. She managed to find housing for herself and her sister, and she has now been accepted to university. So there are some phenomenal successes with this program. And it's very much due in part to the clinical counselors that we're able to support full-time in this atmosphere.
1 minute.
So I just wanted to say together, we have a lasting impact on these vulnerable youth, especially at this time. We can create a more equitable community in which all youth are able to succeed and in which COVID-19 does not disproportionately affect the most vulnerable, as we have seen. So again, I appreciate your time and your consideration in redirecting these funds. And our request was to have those $10,000 from purchasing a vehicle to supporting mental health. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Council.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. And if I may say, and I don't usually jump in ahead of other council members, you know, if this was $1 million, I suppose I might be more interested in sticking to the rules. But in the midst of a worldwide pandemic, when the greatest issue faced, based on the emails we receive in this city, relate to people who are homeless without hope, I'd really like to think that $10,000 redirected from a bus that would have been extremely useful if we were living in more normal times, that might ensure that one more person gets through teen years into what I'll call a productive life or a happier life instead of ending up in the streets is money well invested. Not that I'm indicating how I think council should vote on this issue, because I appreciate that rules are rules, but this is a small amount of money for a program that is extremely vital. Councillor Martman.
Thank you. Through you, I didn't quite hear, you said there was 15 in 2019, and how many now in 2020?
Sorry, it opened in September of 2019, so this school year it's been open and it's had 15 students.
15 students at this time. And with permission, and then I could be able to speak to it, I would like to, I had the motion right here. I would like to move that council.
I'll let the questions go first and then move.
Okay, I was just going to get it on the table, but that's okay.
Come to you, don't worry.
I am.
Councillor Bonner. You're more anxious than I am, Councillor.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Ms. Martin, if I may. The council voted for this on January 13th, and of the money to pay for the bus. COVID kind of hit in around middle of March. Can I ask you why you didn't buy the bus between January and March?
Yes, Your Worship, in response to Councillor Bonner. I believe, and I'm going to be speaking from what I know, they were hoping to get additional funds to purchase that bus, and when COVID-19 hit, they were not able to get those additional funds from another charity.
Okay, in the event that you didn't get the funds for the bus anyway, would the money then would have been returned to the city, I'm guessing?
Yes, but they're still in the process of trying to find additional funds, so we're concerned that this motion may not go through, and so we are still in the process of trying to find additional funds, though, to be frank, I'm not sure how successful we'll be.
And thank you for that. And one more, if I may, is how many additional students are going to be helped by this?
Yes, 20 extra students. So we have the capacity right now for 20 students. We have 15, but if we go ahead with this, we're hoping that we'll be able to add an additional classroom, which will allow us to have a capacity of 40 total
I see.
in September.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Bonner asked one of my questions, so through you to Ms. Martin. Can you give us an idea of the kind of the age range of these youth that are taking part in
Yes,
this
so,
valuable program?
yep, Your Worship, in response to Councillor Turley's question, we support grade 10 to 12. We're hoping in Nanaimo that we'll be, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to share this part, but add additional grades as well. That's our intent.
Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you to the delegation for your great work. I'm curious, it seems a little foggy to me. So the report says Take a Hike would like to hire its clinical counselor to start earlier than anticipated in order to support youth to get back into classrooms, but I'm also hearing that the program is going to double in capacity.
Yeah.
So is it about starting that clinical counselor earlier and then onboarding additional students? And then will that clinical counselor be sustained throughout the year?
Yes, correct. So we would start them immediately. We do provide support during the summer months. So, we are attached to school districts, but we provide support to their families and the students themselves throughout the year. So it would allow us to start that immediately.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you, Worship. I was just going to move the motion to redirect the funding, but I'll let
We'll let
Councillor Martman do that. Also, thank you for your work, and I really appreciate the thought to redirect this funding. I know it is difficult times, and relationships are the critical thing to keep youth engaged, and especially during that period. So it's a smart move. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go for it, Sandy.
So the motion's moved by Councillor Martman.
Sure, motion is moved. That's council authorize it. Take a Hike at-Risk Youth Foundation to redirect the 10,000 Community Vitality Grant towards mental health support for its students. And if I can speak to it?
And seconded Councillor Gesselbrock. Yes,
Thank you.
go ahead.
I understand that in ordinary, the rules say that we don't usually cover operational funds. But I believe that these are exactly the types of program that are needed, and especially in this time. COVID is an exceptional time and calls for us to think exceptionally. And I believe that what this program presents is supporting our children and our youth to make the right choices, to be able to have hope, and to become progressive and awesome citizens in our society. So with that, I'm happy to move the motion. Thank you.
Thank you.
You don't need to say anything further, Councillor Gesselbrock, or do you?
I love the sound of these progressive citizens of our society.
Counting votes already. Councillor Bonner.
I just have a question for staff, if I may.
Yes.
Your Worship, we can probably
Yes.
ask
Yes.
the delegation to sit down
You
now.
can.
Thank
You may stand down now.
I can
Ms.
stand
Martin.
down?
Thank
Should I
you very
wipe-
much for
shall I
coming
wipe
tonight.
down? I'll wait.
Very gracious of you. The COVID doesn't get us, the chapped skin will.
Oh, yes, my question, it's through you, if I may, to Mr. Lindsay. I'm trying to figure out this particular grant. We have some additional money in this granting structure. You said, I believe it's $25,000. In the event that we didn't vote for this motion and that money was returned, would they be able to reapply? Are we taking applications more for the extra money that's in there?
Your worship, through Councillor Bonner, so if in any situation, an applicant's unable to fulfill their proposal, then normally that money would simply be returned to the city and it would go back into general revenue. They would then be eligible to apply next year, because these are annual grants, so they could come forward next year, application evaluated, council would make that determination. The part that's in this report that I was trying to clarify, that in this specific event, if council doesn't proceed with this grant, it was suggested that maybe that it could just be topped up next year, so you had $35,000 rather than $25,000. I was just saying that'd be a subsequent decision by council. It wouldn't automatically happen. I think it's a broader discussion you need to have about any of these grants that are unable to fulfill their intended purpose.
Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. I came here this evening prepared to be the bad guy, the Grinch, and I do have reservations. Granted that we live in unusual times and that we have to take each case, I think, on its individual merits, I'm still very uncomfortable that the criteria for this grant money is very definite, that it should not go to funding for staffing or operational expenses. And if that had been the purpose of the application in the first place, I suspect it would have been turned down as not fitting the criteria. So I think we have to keep that in mind. Having said that, my preference would have been that the Take a Hike Foundation came back to us next year and hopefully with improved circumstances reapply for money for their van and perhaps an additional amount for their van. That would have been my preference. However, I was persuaded by the delegation, and congratulations, Ms. Martin, you spoke very well, and I'm convinced of the good work that your group is doing. So I will support this recommendation, although with some reservation. Thank you.
Now, Councillor Bonner, don't say something that's going to throw this off.
No, I won't. I was just going to say I was of the same view as Councillor Thorpe. Right. Having sat on numerous granting organizations in my time as United Way, it's really important to maintain the integrity of the granting system and not do what we're about to do tonight. But with that said, we are in unfortunate circumstances, and I think it's time to have a more open view on how the world works and how we can work within it. And I am looking forward to our conversations the next couple of years about how we can help organizations, both operational and for capital. Thank you.
And Pharaoh's heart was unhardened. All those in favor? Oh, look at the reluctance. Opposed? Councillor Armstrong, you're in favor? Can you hold your thumb up? Yes, thank you. Done. Thank you very much, everyone. I appreciate and I share the challenge, but I'm willing to stick by the exception rule in tough times. The next is Animal Control Service Contract Renewal. Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Worship. As council is aware, we recently undertook a review of our animal control services, and on the June 8th special council meeting, you received quite a lengthy and thorough presentation around the findings of that review, including a number of recommendations. It was simply a for information report on that afternoon, so I don't plan on going back over all of those recommendations, but I would say in general, the recommendations of the report talk about not only retaining our existing system of having an external resource for this, but that we have an expanded system with additional resources available. What that would also mean is by proceeding and maintaining that program, it means that we'll be looking for capital investments in our existing facility on the Nanaimo Lakes Road, where we currently have the pound today. So this evening, we're asking for council simply to endorse in principle the recommendations of the Animal Control Services Review, and we direct staff to prepare an RFP subject to the adoption of your financial plan. And the reason, Your Worship, we're not recommending going ahead right now with an RFP is because, as I mentioned, that a service model is recommended to be an expanded service model, which would require a higher budget. So rather than do a business case, we're going to come back as part of your budget. It'll be identified by finance as one of your drivers in your budget deliberations, and it'll be identified at that point. So council would be asked to make its final determination there. It also would include in your plan then capital upgrades to those buildings that we've talked about in the past if we're going to stick with this model. So that's the first recommendation, Your Worship, again, endorse in principle. The second is the review included a number of recommendations around our existing animal control bylaw. And so the second recommendation is direct staff prepare an amendment to our bylaw to outline, to bring forward those recommendations. And the final is there was through the review some identification of the important work that CatNap does and how, from the consultant's perspective, it was important to make sure that they are able to continue on with that work. So the third is just direct staff to work with the CatNap Society to identify measures to support their work, Your Worship. So if these are adopted, then the next step would be in front of you as part of the budget deliberations.
Thank you, Mr. Lindsay. Questions for Mr. Lindsay? Councillor Bonner?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Lindsay. Maybe my memory's going on me, mind as well. Under scope of service, I thought we talked about that the work would go to Public Works and that we would increase their capacity to pick up animal carcasses.
Yes, Your Worship. Sorry, I should have pointed that out, introducing the report. That is a change. It was identified by the consultants that was a potential option. We explored that with Public Works, and after talking to them and their capacity, the recommendation came back that it would be better to have a separate contract specifically for the large animal removal, not for the small dogs and cats, but for the larger animals. So if we proceed with this, we'd be also looking for a separate RFP just on the large animal removal.
So who would do the dogs and cats?
It would be under the current contract.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Gesselbrook.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've got a few questions here. The first, going to remain sort of with the status quo of having it a contract service. In the report, it did talk about there not being a difference between it being a contracted service or an in-house model. And I was just curious, the benefit of keeping it sort of status quo how it is there a lot of work up front that needs to happen to bring it to in-house?
Your Worship, through Your Worship to Councillor Gesselbrook, to paraphrase the consultant, I think he was saying that he couldn't find any substantive rationale of why to change the model from the external model to inside. There was no strong reasoning why to bring it in-house. The existing model, we believe, gives us flexibility. So, for example, in this RFP, we're recommending increasing staffing numbers. If in the future that's found it's unnecessary, it's easier through a service contract to amend that as one area I would identify.
Mm-hmm. So I just think, going forward, I do think that we're only going to experience more and more dogs and cats, and it'll probably be an expanding service, and having it in-house is a little bit more control, and I think it integrates more with our communications and that. So I do think that there is quite a lot of benefit to going that way, and I think too, just looking at in terms of stability of the workers, it does provide a bit more stability being a city employee, and I think probably, less upheaval should we have to change the contract. I think we can just control it a bit more, so something to consider going forward. And just the question, when do we, when's the next review that we'd be experiencing? Would it be about 3 years?
Your Worship, my recall is that these would be 5 year under the RFP.
Okay, thank you. I do have a few more questions under different sections, but I'll wait another turn.
That was very generous of you. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Mr. Lindsay. With regard to dealing with animal carcasses, why are we excluding dogs and cats from carcasses? Would it not make more sense to have an RFP for all animal carcasses as opposed to specific ones?
Your worship, my understanding of the rationale is that both they have the equipment necessary to deal with that, but they also have the databases that allow them to connect with the owners of those animals more quickly than maybe another contract would. But specifically, the rationale of going to a different model was that these large animals, which are really outside of what I think the initial intent was, take up a significant amount of time and resources off of what otherwise could be focused on dogs and cats, I guess, to put it.
Councillor Gesselbrook.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Mr. Lindsay, I just got a question in terms of the relationship of like SPCA and the Animal Control Center. There's a few recommendations around cats, and I'm curious going forward. There was one recommendation to include, I think in 2017 there was a study done and recommendations about upgrades that were needed. And one of those were to have a special cat area at the Animal Control Center. I'm just curious, is that still on the table being considered, or at the moment is that not part of the recommendations for the renovations?
I'm sorry, Your Worship, you're getting into a level of detail that I'd have to get back to council on. My understanding that part of the capital projects included those recommendations, but I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to follow up with council on that.
Just, in reading through it, it did look like cats were becoming more and more of a problem, and we are relying on a nonprofit to provide control of feral cat populations. And other jurisdictions are moving towards the control of them, but I just wasn't sure, like, say, if when we pull in cats, what cats go to the SPCA, and how do we rely on the SPCA, or how does the Animal Control Center rely on the SPCA to deal with the feral cats, or the cats that are collared, or the cats that are strayed? And if that space is needed, I would really like to see that included in the renovation. So I don't know if we have another chance to touch on this, or are we deciding on whether or not the renovations are included or not in this decision?
Your Worship, it's simply in principle at this point. So the capital improvements to those buildings, and we'll outline in more detail, would come forward as part of your budget deliberations for 2021. I'm just quickly looking at the report, and I do note that in here they do include recommendations for improvements to accommodate cats at that facility. But it will come back to council and be part of the capital project for your budget.
One last one. Finally, just in the recommendations of looking to amend the city's cat licensing control, just around requiring spaying of cats and having a mechanism to license them. I was quite surprised at the number of cats estimated. Like in Kelowna, there's 13,000 cats. The cat naps 500 feral cats a year. And that is a lot of animals, and I'm just curious, if we're not keeping tabs on this, is this situation of feral cats and their effects that they have on sound birds and pooing in people's yards that they don't have business being in. And I read a report, of contamination of water sources. Where are we in terms of our feral cat population situation spiraling out of control because we're not regulating it a bit more upstream, and how that decision was made?
Your Worship, I think through Councillor Gesselbrook, I think the items you've identified, I think are generally those that are articulated when you talk to people about cats, who are concerned about cats, but I don't have any hard data for you in terms of number of feral cats in the city. But again, bringing back that bylaw, it would be a separate approval process for council to consider any amendments to the bylaw.
Great. Well, I guess we'll stay tuned.
Thank you, Councillor Gesselbrook. Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Worship. Just to help Mr. Lindsay out a little bit, and to Councillor Gesselbrook, I know that Ms. Robertson has done an animal control bylaw before, and will be working with Dale's team, Mr. Lindsay's team, in doing the new one, and I know that's one of the aspects, that they'll look into all of those things and then bring back the options or the rationale as to why it's not included, and that, like Mr. Lindsay said, will be brought back to council for decision at that time.
We'll have a first-class cat bylaw, Councillor
I
Gesselbauer.
want to say thanks to the consultant. That was a very thorough report and very educational. Thank you.
Cats have never had so much consideration before. Councillor Thorpe, do you care to make the motion, recommended motion?
I will move the three recommendations as printed, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Would you have a seconder? Councillor Turley? Any discussion? If not, I just want to say thank you to everyone who was involved in preparing this report and getting it to council. All those in favor? Any contrary? You're not opposed? You're in favor, Councillor Armstrong? Yes? Yes. No, none contrary. Thank you very much. Carried. The next is the extension to building permit application inquiry expiry timelines. Mr. Lindsay again.
Thank you, Worship. I'm going to turn over immediately here to Mr. Holm, who is the author of the report, who can walk council through the rationale and provide some background on this topic.
Don't forget to wipe down.
I did.
Oh, good. Thank you, Mr. Lindsay. Welcome, Mr. Holm.
Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship, Council. Thanks for inviting me to speak to this tonight. And a pretty brief introduction. The intention here is to amend the building bylaw. The report introduces an amendment to the building bylaw that would allow some flexibility in extending the expiry timeline for building permit applications. Currently, building permit applications expire within 12 months of application if they're not ready to be issued by that period, and there's no flexibility for applicants to, or for staff to extend that timeline 12 months after application. A building permit expires currently. We're finding with the current pandemic situation, some applicants, some owners are having trouble responding to the requirements to have a building permit ready to issue within 12 months. And there's no flexibility, as I mentioned, for that timeline to be extended. The report would introduce basically an additional 6 months, so a total of 18 months for an applicant to meet the requirements to have a building permit issued. That would be extended to 18 months and would actually provide, it would help address the current pandemic situation and some of the challenges that builders, developers are facing, but would also allow the city to be more flexible going forward in responding to similar challenges, wide-scale disruptions to the industry that might occur in the future. So just building some flexibility into the building bylaw that would allow for in unforeseen circumstances where owners, builders are impacted by circumstances similar to the pandemic beyond their control, give us some flexibility to extend those timelines. 18 months we felt was reasonable and would provide some flexibility to help the industry adjust to the current situation. And that's all I have to say. The proposed amendment is identified, the bylaw is identified on page 180 of the agenda, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Mr. Holm. Councillor Bonner?
Thank you, Worship. Just a quick one, and you kind of sort of answered it. You're asking for 18 months at the discretion. Is it like you get either 12 or you get 18? Would you be, because I'm thinking, well, why not just go 2 years and then you have a discretionary time within that? So giving somebody another 2 months just to finalize it, that sort of thing. Would that be a better system, or do you just, you've obviously recommended this one?
Yeah, thank you through your worship to Councillor Bonner's question. So there is some protection from change in bylaw and building code that comes with the extension that we're talking about. So currently, if somebody applies the day before there's a change in bylaw or building code, they have 12 months to fulfill the requirements of the building permit to have it issued and then carry on with construction. Once the building permit's issued, there's also some flexibility that's built into the bylaw with regard to commencement of construction and continuation of construction. And then there's a 2-year timeline from the issuance of the building permit to complete a project. You can also apply for extension once for a total of 4 years from the time the building permit's issued. So we're talking about, right now, we're talking about potentially in a significant situation where an owner is unable to get the permit issued within 18 months, or within 12 months currently, they can apply for an extension up to 18 months, which we feel gives reasonable flexibility without running into some challenges that we might face where a building code has changed or a bylaw's passed, development cost charge bylaws. There's still reasonable flexibility for extension without extending that protection beyond what's necessary, the protection from change in bylaw. I'm not sure if that answers your question, Councillor Bonner.
I think so.
Okay.
Any further questions? If not, Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move that Building Amendment Bylaw 2020, number 7224.03, to allow for the extension of building permit application expiry timeline past first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmens. All those in favor? Any contrary? Councillor Armstrong, you're in favor? Yes, okay, as opposed to thumbs down, all right. None contrary, thank you very much. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move that Building Amendment Bylaw 2020, number 7224.03, pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? None contrary? Thank you very much. And Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I'll move that Building Amendment Bylaw 2020, number 7224.03, pass third reading.
Seconded, Councillor Turley. All those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is 531 Kennedy Street, amendment of project under the revitalization tax exemption bylaw. Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Worship. They let me move from the big bubble over to the little bubble, so I get a chair here.
You've joined Councillor Thorpe's
Jeopardy panel.
The Jeopardy panel.
Thank you, Your Worship. This project it should actually be familiar to Council because last summer, Council actually approved the inclusion of this property into the revitalization tax exemption program. However, there was a condition that they obtain their building permit prior to the end of the year. Unfortunately, they were unable to do so, and as such, we're asking for a minor amendment to the program to allow them for that to be extended, provided that the building permit is issued by the end of this month. Your Worship, the building permit is ready, and it's been reviewed by staff and ready to be picked up, and so we don't see any problems with proceeding with this proposed amendment. Happy to answer any questions.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Mr. Lindsay. Is there any reason given about why there was a delay in applying?
Your Worship, I'm sorry, I'd have to follow up with staff on that, because I'm not sure if that date was the date of the, as Mr. Holm just explained, was the 1-year anniversary from the date of the application, or if it was simply the date we selected when we brought forward the tax exemption. But I don't have a reason, Your Worship.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. So when did he put in the application for this permit?
For the original permit, is that the question? When?
Yeah, like it says that unable to pay in a building permit, but by the deadline, but when did he put it in? How long did the process go through?
I'm going to throw it to contestant number 2, Mr. Holm. Apparently he has the answer, Your Worship, sorry.
Come on down, Mr. Holm.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll try and answer Councillor Bonner's question through Your Worship. I believe the building permit application was made towards the end of April last year.
So it's been in the process for the better part of a year?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Gurry.
Yeah, that's a different date.
Ms. Gurry, no?
Oh, sorry, no, sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry, Your Worship. I thought you saw my no-no.
Councillor Thorpe?
Thank you, Your Worship. I will move that council approve the amended revitalization tax exemption agreement for a proposed 8-unit multifamily building at 531 Kennedy Street.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Sorry, Councillor Brown. Oh, you're opposed. Sorry. Thank you. F, development permit application number DP 1169, 1125 Seafield Crescent. And Mr. Lindsay, are you doing this or Mr. Holm?
I'll start off, Your Worship. Thank you, Your Worship. As you mentioned, development permit application. We think this is for an exciting project for 124 new units of affordable seniors housing on the subject property. There is a delegation this evening, so I won't go into great detail on the project or the proposed variance, but I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that council has either now or after the delegation.
Thank you very much. We have a delegation. And forgive me if I mispronounce, Darius Feruzli, architect, AIBC, and I assume Mr. Kutzner and Mr. Stevens are here but not speaking. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah.
The floor is yours. 5 minutes, please.
Worship and councillors, thank you for opportunity. Honestly, we are present here just to answer the question. Since I'm here, I'm going to just give you a very short presentation. There is a 2 building at the site. It was 2 separate property. It's a couple of years now we're working in this project. In order to maximize what we can do in the property, we consolidated these 2 properties. One of the buildings is very big footprint with a very minimal as a unit, just 30 unit. Originally, we want to add 30 unit, but since BC Housing did a study on that building and is not really in the good shape and is end of the life, so decided to basically to phase 1 to build 60 unit to move these 30 resident to the new building and at least have a 30 additional unit. And phase 2 will be demolishing this long building and build a building B, 64 unit. We do have a 3, I believe, the minor variance in the project. One will be very minor landscape setback between this property and the school. Portion of the 1/3 of that property line instead of 1.8 meters landscape is, I believe, is 1. The second one is the building height. Recently, a study done on the hospital area. The suggestion then that hospital neighborhood plan is to go up to the 6th floor. We are applying for 5 floors and also allow 250 unit per acres, which we are hectares, sorry. But we are around 110, if I'm not wrong. So the last one, so basically we are not going to maximizing as hospital study suggested. And the last one is the parking. Parking, we are 11 short end of the day after building 124 unit. At the moment, we do have a 55 unit, which they have just 25 of those units, they have cars. So it's basically 38% roughly. There is the parking is needed as it is. We are providing 92% of the parking stalls. I want to introduce Eric to come to basically have some 2 minutes left to have some presentation, and then we are here to answer any questions is for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kutzner. Mr. Stevens.
Yes, Your Worship, councillors. So I'm a director of the society, along with Matthew, who is here with me. We're very excited about the project. We've been pairing up with BC Housing for about 2.5 years now, trying to get this project off the ground, and we're happy to be at the development permit stage. So I'm available to answer any questions council might have.
If you're finished your presentation, then we'll move to questions. Councillor Armstrong, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. One of my questions is, have you given any consideration to making places for scooters to be able to electrically charge?
Asking if there's any provision for scooters to be electrically charged at the facility.
Yes.
Yes.
We will have both parking for scooters and charging capacity for.
And a follow-up, we heard when we did not give, when we gave the variance on the other portable place on, I believe it was Prideaux or Milton, I can't remember which one anyhow, that carriage were not able to go in because there was no parking for them. I mean, we forget about the fact that many of these people have visitors, carriage, and without parking, they don't get those services. So is there going to be any movement for visitors parking so that they can have carriage? And my last point, this area suffers terribly from a lack of parking, so I'm very concerned about the variance in parking. Thank you.
If I think I heard Councillor Armstrong, concern about spots designated for visitors, including healthcare workers, and the variance in parking is a concern for her.
Yes, we have adequate visitor parking designated, and that for care workers. We are not a care facility. I appreciate that we're an independent living facility, but we recognize there are care workers that are required for some of our tenants.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to the delegation. My question is regarding parking as well. I see the variance is asking for 11 fewer parking spots down to 126. And then in the second paragraph, it's referring to the applicant is proposing 149 affordable rental units for seniors, and 92% of the units will have access to parking space. And 92% equates to 137, and I'm just wondering where the difference is.
Yes, I'd have to refer to our architect, but I think we have 137 units. Do we not?
92% of the 442, basically, 137 is 126. Basically, 92% of required parking, not the number of the parking.
Perfect. Thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. My question is also on parking for the completely opposite reason the last two. You stated that only 38% of the residents there use parking, which means that your parking capacity is twice what you need, basically. And was there any consideration to asking for a variance down to, say, 75 spaces and saving yourself a lot of space?
That wasn't a consideration because the demographics of the project is going to change somewhat. We're going to have a larger capacity for mid-level income seniors. So it's not going to be all low cost. So we're going to provide more parking to cover that. That's the purpose for going to the 92%.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Any other questions for the delegation? Thank you very much, gentlemen. Appreciate it. Councillor Brown.
I'll move the recommendation, Your Worship.
Seconded, Councillor Gesselbrock.
Can I just quickly speak to it because there's been some talk of parking that did come up at the design panel, and it was discussed, and sort of the answer from the applicant was essentially the parking was being designed around the use and the potential market that is associated with the building. So it was sort of, the amount of spaces were seen to be practical in the sense that they provided for the units, but also didn't provide an excessive amount of parking. So the design panel supported the recommendations. They thought the rationale made sense, especially for the type of use.
Thank you very much. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I just wanted to indicate that I'll be supporting the recommendations with the variances. Parking is always a concern, but I thought in this case the variances were quite justifiable, so I'm willing to support them. Thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. I'll also be supporting the recommendations. Appreciate what the design panel committee did work on. I did a high-level view of the entire area, and it's very walkable. I mean, all the amenities that you would probably want, including a pub around the corner and a cannabis store, are within a very short walk of that place. So I raised this before, if we plan for more cars, we will get more cars, so we should consider planning for less cars, because that's eventually what's going to happen. Kudos, throw it out to Edmonton, who have just completely got rid of their parking bylaw, and it's a wild, wild west there of good things. Thank you.
Could be just a wild west, Councillor Bonner. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will be opposed. This area struggles with lack of parking as it is, and to put more cars onto the streets where there isn't any availability parking, I'm opposed to that. Many people feel seniors don't drive. Many seniors drive, especially now with COVID. They do not want to be taking public transportation. Many of them don't have the ability to walk those distances to grocery stores. So for those reasons, I'll be opposing the variance. Thank you.
I appreciate Councillor Armstrong's concerns around parking and Councillor Bonner's suggestion we move to a more radical solution. Notwithstanding my position is probably somewhere in between the two of them, I'm happy to support this. This is, just as Councillor Bonner pointed out by walking the area, the perfect area for densification. And if any of these folks have health issues, what a perfect spot just across from the hospital. So this council has been committed to increasing densification around areas where people are walkable. The 15-minute walking test, and this meets that test, and so I will happily support this. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Contrary? Councillor Armstrong, you're opposed? Yes. Thank you very much. The next is development permit application number DP 1170-1615 Northfield Road. Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Worship. As you mentioned, development permit this time for 11-unit development on Northfield Road. As outlined in the report, Your Worship, this property was subject of a relatively recent rezoning, going through the rezoning process in 2018. And I would note that the plan before you this evening is very similar to that was shared at the time that the land came forward for rezoning. So as mentioned, 11 units. There are variances that are being requested, largely to do with setbacks. Given the nature of the property, a relatively tight property, in this case asking for front yard setbacks from 3.5 to 1.2 meters, and we note rear yard setbacks from 7.5 to 6 meters. So both of those variances, Your Worship, I would generally define as allowing for reasonable building footprints while accommodating the required parking and drive aisles between the units. The other variance is a side yard setback, in this case from 3 meters to 1.5. The bylaw actually has, it allows for, it's a bit unusual in that it says one side yard can be 1.5 and the other is 3. And the idea by the intent is that the buildings would be along the street and you'd have a drive lane that would take you to the rear. So the idea is that you'd always have a 3-meter setback. In this case, the proposal actually has the access coming down and then providing, buildings at the front and the back. So there's no need for that additional setback on the side. And the final is a landscape buffer. So they're proposing to reduce the landscape buffer down along one small portion of the property down to the setback that's allowed, and along the drive aisle down to 0. Your Worship, happy to take any questions from Council.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. If I may, through you to Mr. Lindsay, and I don't have any issue with this proposal, But I recall a couple of weeks ago, council had another development application a couple of blocks further up Northfield, where the development, I believe, was for 9 units, and it was turned down by council. And the main reason, I think the main concern was that the city was saying that the developer in that case had to use a rear laneway for traffic, for access and egress. Now, I know there's no lane behind this site, but I'm interested to know why one person was told that they could not access driveway onto Northfield, and this particular case in front of us is being allowed to access Northfield with driveway.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Thorpe. To start with, I would say that in all cases on major roads, the recommendation is to reduce the number of direct access points we have. It does a couple of things. It helps us with both pedestrian and cycle features along those corridors, and also allows for on-street parking, more on-street parking where it can be accommodated. Your Worship, so in all cases, we'll look at having access from the secondary road, or where possible, consolidating accesses between properties, and we often do that along major roads. In the application that Councillor Thorpe is speaking to, it actually had a lane, as he mentioned, and under our bylaw, you're always required to have access from the lower classification of road. So where a lane's present or a secondary street's present, access is directed to be from those locations. Where it's not, we work to identify the best location possible while trying to minimize the impact on the future road standards.
Thank you. That answers my question.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I remember seeing this design quite some time ago. Has the design actually turned 90 degrees to the original one, where there was a straight lane coming in from Northfield? Do we know that?
Your Worship, I've looked at the rezoning application relatively recently, and my recall, it's almost exactly the same as what was presented to council during the rezoning. So I'm not aware of any change.
Okay, thank you. In terms of the variances that we're being asked today for, does that allow the developer to build more units there?
Your Worship, I would say what it does is allows the form of development that's proposed. Again, I think there could be more units. It depends more on the unit composition than it does these setbacks, I would suggest. So if there was smaller units, less bedrooms, for example, overall footprint reduction, you could possibly achieve same or higher densities without the variances. So no, I don't think it's a direct correlation to increasing the number of units on the site.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. through you to Mr. Lindsay. I'm just trying to figure out, I'm assuming it's going to be a private hauler for garbage, and I'm trying to see on the schematics where the bin would be, or bins, I guess it would be.
Sorry, Your Worship, I'm just, maybe if I can ask looking at the landscape plan, I'm sorry, I don't see it identified on there. I don't know if Mr. Holm has any information you can share on that.
Thank you, Your Worship, to the councillor's question. So I've just been informed that the bins are within the garage. So individual, smaller container collection. Private, but still smaller containers.
You won't have to see the garbage, Councillor Turley. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. I'm just looking at the overhead, and is that an old picture? Because I don't see the roundabout or the lights in there, and I'm wondering where the lights are in correlation to the developmented property.
I hope, Mr. Lindsay, you heard that
Yeah,
clearly.
Your
I
Worship,
didn't.
I believe Councillor Armstrong's referring to the works that have been completed in the last couple of years on the corner of Boundary and Northfield. And so under that aerial photograph, she's correct, it's a little bit out of date by that photo. It looks like it's during the time that was actually being constructed. So the subject property is about 2 properties away from where you now, if you come down Northfield, where you would turn right if you're heading down Boundary. It's just beyond the second property. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Follow up, if I may.
Yes, please.
I share the concerns expressed by Councillor Thorpe. We had another development, a smaller one, which we said that we couldn't allow people to go onto Northfield Road. And in my opinion, that laneway does not even constitute a road, and it wasn't even accessible. So I really struggle with this because I think we're treating one group differently than another. So it's a struggle for me. Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Ready for the recommendation?
We're out of your worship questions. And
All right, thank you. I will, in that case, move that council issue development permit number 1170 at 1615 Northfield Road with the following variances. Reduce the minimum front yard setback from 3.5 meters to 1.2 meters. Reduce the minimum side yard setback from 3 meters to 1.5 meters for Unit 6. Reduce the minimum rear yard setback from 7.5 meters to 6 meters. And finally, reduce the minimum landscape buffer width from 1.8 meters to 1.5 meters along the west side property line and from 1.8 meters to 0 meters along the east side property line.
And seconded, Councillor Martman. Any discussion, councillors? All those in favor? Contrary? Is that a thumbs down, Councillor Armstrong? Thumbs up. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Your Worship, I'm sorry. I believe that Councillor Armstrong is opposed. Councillor Armstrong, would you mind taking yourself off mute to settle whether you're opposed? Oh, okay.
Thank you very much. And the next is rezoning application number RA 000451-1840 Stewart Avenue. Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Worship. This rezoning application is for a site-specific application for a cannabis retail store. As outlined in your report, there have been 22, including this 22 applications for cannabis stores since Council amended the bylaw in the fall of 2018 in response to the legalization of cannabis. There's been, since that time, 11 bylaws that have been adopted by Council, 1 denied, with the remaining still in the process. Your Worship, staff have reviewed this application and believe that it's in compliance with the cannabis retail store rezoning criteria that were previously established, and are recommending that Council support the application.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thorpe.
Actually, I do have a question, Your Worship, if I may, through you to Mr. Lindsay. And I'm willing to support this application, but I have a question regarding the community contribution, which quite honestly I think the word is disappointed to see, because community contribution almost invariably, in my recollection, goes to a community improvement, usually a park or some amenity in the neighborhood of the development. And in this case, the recommendation is a donation to what is presumably a nonprofit organization, which I don't recall having experienced before. So I wonder if Mr. Lindsay could comment on that.
Sorry, to Your Worship, generally I would agree with Councillor Thorpe. It's not the typical response we see to when we request for a response to your community amenity policy. However, I would say that through similar applications such as liquor applications in the past, when we've been looking at liquor stores and rezonings, that there has been the odd time when the contribution's been made to agencies or nonprofits, which, for example, may provide support or counseling around addiction. So it's not unprecedented, but certainly I would say not common.
If I may, Your Worship, as a follow-up to Mr. Lindsay, did staff suggest alternate possible contributions?
Your Worship, in general, when staff meet with applicants, we provide them a copy of our guidelines, our policies, and make recommendations of areas where there may be projects, whether they're capital projects, local improvement projects, or other in the area. And in Fall Else Fails, the housing legacy is one that's often cited by staff as being a worthwhile place to make a contribution. But at the end of the day, it's up to the applicant to make their proposal, and in this case, this is the proposal that came forward from the applicants.
Thank you.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Mr. Lindsay. So again, with regard to the community contribution, so do we know if this donation is going to construct something or provide for citizens within the city, or is it outside of the city included?
Your Worship, Mr. Holmes had more direct contact with the applicant around this. Maybe I'll let him speak to that.
Thank you, through Your Worship, to Councillor Turley's question. So in this case, the applicant is proposing the contribution towards Nanaimo First Nation, the emergency housing program it's administered. So it's not a nonprofit per se. It's a housing program that's administered by Nanaimo First Nation. So it is another level. It's another level of government administering a program that meets the needs of its citizens. It's the people that it's providing services for. So it is a bit, and my understanding is it would be within the community to serve members of Nanaimo First Nation. It is a bit of an unusual community amenity contribution, but it isn't to a nonprofit per se, and we wouldn't generally encourage contributions to a nonprofit. We'd probably not recommend in favor of such a contribution typically. Although actually probably an opportunity to highlight here while we're having this conversation that we are planning to hopefully this year bring forward, possibly early 2021, bring forward a community amenity contribution policy. We're currently undergoing for council's consideration. We're currently undergoing a review. We have a consultant engaged in that, and there may be some dialogue around these types of unusual community amenity contributions that come up from time to time that we can have at that time. But in this case, it is actually supporting a program that's administered by Nanaimo for its members. And we felt that that was similar to a type of a program that the city would, the housing legacy, for instance, that the city would generally administer, that we'd see such contributions go towards typically.
So if I could just ask a follow-up. So is that meaning that, how do I put this politically? It can be used for a housing project, for example, in Cedar. It doesn't have to be within the city of Nanaimo. That's kind of what I'm getting at.
That would be up to Nanaimo to, they're the administrator of the program, but it is to serve the needs of their members. It possibly could go to a need not within the city boundary necessarily. They do have members and lands not within the city boundary, but that's a possibility. I couldn't say that it wouldn't.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. I also thought this was a unique way of doing a community amenity contribution. I see here that Chief Wise is in support of it. And to everyone listening here, this money will be used by Nanaimo First Nation in the traditional territory of Nanaimo First Nation to help people who live in the traditional territory of Nanaimo First Nation. So I'm in support of this. Thank you.
Would someone care to make the motion, recommended motion? Councillor Bonner. Second. Seconded Councillor Martman.
I'm sorry, Your Worship. It's a bylaw, so I need it to be read.
It's been a long day. Started with a dentist.
So, Your Worship, if I may, I will move the zoning amendment bylaw 2020 number 4500.178 to rezone 1840 Stewart Avenue to allow cannabis retail store as a site-specific use in the W2 Harbor Waterfront Zone past first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Turley? I think you're the only one opposed. Motion carries. Councillor Thorpe?
Thank you, Your Worship. I will move that zoning amendment bylaw 2020 number 4500.178 pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner. Any discussion? All those in, Councillor Hemmons,
Armstrong?
sorry. Councillor,
No, I'm sorry, Councillor Armstrong, I think.
Councillor Armstrong, did you wish to speak? No?
Oh, sorry.
All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Turley? Motion carries. Councillor Thorpe?
Thank you, Your Worship, and I will move that council direct staff to acquire written confirmation that the proposed donation has been received by Snuneymuxw First Nation Emergency Housing Program prior to bylaw adoption.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next are bylaws, zoning amendment bylaw 2019, number 4500.157.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move that zoning amendment bylaw 2019, number 4500.157, to rezone 2379 Browns Lane from single-dwelling residential R1 to residential corridor, a COR1, be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmons. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. The next is zoning bylaw amendment bylaw number 2020, number 4500.175. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will move that zoning bylaw amendment bylaw 2020, number 4500.175, to amend Schedule A zoning map with general mapping amendments be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Brown. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. And we have the bylaw status sheet for information only. Councillor Gesselbrock has brought a notice of motion, which will be for consideration at the council meeting on July 20th. Correspondence. We've received a letter from Dr. Henry respecting homeless encampment health issues, guidelines in the context of COVID-19. Unless someone's requiring any action, simply noted on the correspondence. And finally, other business. Councillor Armstrong, speak into your mic.
Thank you, Your
please.
Worship. I'd like to move that council direct staff to prepare a report for council outlining alternative tracking methods available for capturing each councillor's vote on motions, other than the official meeting minutes. That allows for easy access of council voting records by members of the public.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. Councillor Armstrong, do you wish to speak to this?
No, I just think it's a lot easier format for people to see. It doesn't have to be something fancy. It could be simple as an Excel sheet, but I'll wait for the report. I just think it's something that a lot of our citizens have been asking for. Thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. I thank Councillor Armstrong for bringing this forward. I can tell you that during my tenure as a council critic, this would have been coming quite handy. However, I'm dubious that we actually need a staff report on this, right? To me, it's rather simple that we just have an Excel spreadsheet, which is also a PDF that you can download that gets updated every time the minutes are passed. I just, like how much staff time is going to be used up coming up with a report to provide something like that? It's a question to staff, I guess.
I'm going to go to Ms. Gurry first.
Thank you, Worship. I'm not opposed to doing a staff report because there's a couple of other options. The City of Vancouver, for example, does have a software program that's a little bit more fancy than an Excel spreadsheet and might offer some more functionality that council might be interested in hearing about. However, I do not know the costs, so I would bring that information back in a report to let you know and then give you the option of the simple simple, I'm not sure for inputting, et cetera, but the Excel format versus a software program. So I would give you the options available.
To refer to Councillor Brown's earlier remarks tonight about his father, a job worth doing is worth doing right, something I learned at the Chevron in the day when gas jockeys used to wear bow ties. I'm inclined to agree with Ms. Gurry.
In that case, I
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I will certainly support this, this motion and look forward to the report on options. I'm not convinced that a lot of people have been demanding this information, and I'm not convinced that it is overly useful in the long term. If somebody wants to know how I vote on a subject, they're welcome to look at the minutes or ask me, and I'm always willing to explain why I voted yea or nay on any given topic. To me, what is more important is that councillors vote with a reason behind their vote, or some consideration that they can indicate that they have given to the question at hand. So I'll support it if it's something that we feel that staff don't have to spend too much time preparing for us, then fine.
Councillor Bonner again, or are you taking yourself? Councillor Martman, thank you.
And further to Councillor Thorpe as to why I'm supporting this is more transparent we can be, the better. Thank you.
Councillor Turley.
I just thought I'd throw a little humor here. It's going to help with my memory, so I remember how I voted.
Well said. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any contrary? Seeing none, motion carries. Thank you very much.
Your Worship.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. We kind of quickly glanced past the correspondence, and I was wondering, the correspondence that has been forwarded is actually, I don't want to say profound, but it's actually, there's a lot of information in there that I think may be of use to us in these times. And so I'm wondering what would be the next course if we were to look more into that.
I'm going to suggest in a practical way, unless Ms. Gurry or Mr. Rudolph has some suggestion, that maybe the Health and Housing Task Force wants to have a look at the correspondence. Councillor Hemmons?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think it's appropriate that it go to that group who can then make contact with those jurisdictions like Ladysmith or Duncan who are doing small encampments through COVID. So I think, yeah, the Health and Housing Task Force is the appropriate place for it, and I'd support it being sent there. Thank you.
Ms. Gurry, do we actually need a motion for that?
Yes, please.
Refer the correspondence to the Health and Housing Task Force to make recommendations, if any, to council.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmons. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Still the wish of council to return to some in-camera items that we haven't finished.
Yes, Your Worship. So I would suggest that you would recess this open meeting and have a short break so that everything can get turned off and shut down. And maybe you
Yes.
reconvene in 10 or 15 minutes or something like that.
10 minutes. Hi, Leonard Krogh here. I'm here with Karen Lindsay today. She's going to show me how to sign up for our app.
Voyant Alert, the City of Nanaimo's emergency notification system. So we'll start by going into the App Store, Mayor Krogh.
Done?
Next, you're going to hit search, and you're going to search for the app, which is Voyant Alert. So it's VOYENT. Now you see it's already selected it. Click there, hit get, and then we're going to install.
And why are we downloading this app?
We're downloading that so that you can get this onto your phone system, and what it will do is it will send you a push notification out. So if the City of Nanaimo issues an emergency alert, it will actually push